Hello. Class of 22. Congratulations. So welcome to Journalism Day, the first day of our graduation festival that will unfold over the next couple of days. It's a joyous occasion. And I would say of all of the elements of graduation, besides the chance to meet the parents of students that I've gotten to know, Journalism Day is the happiest one on the calendar. And this is the first time, obviously, since 2019 that we've been able to get together this way. And I hope you enjoy the day, celebrate your classmates, listen to some words from extraordinary journalists, and just enjoy your own achievements. You've been an amazing group, and you came at a time of high uncertainty to New York City, fighting through a lot of obstacles. Those of you who came from abroad had to literally figure out how to get here. All of you had to adapt to public health conditions that, as we know, were continually changing. And you did an amazing job. You are a very large group, the largest class we've had in years, and yet you caused very little trouble, so far as we're aware, anyway, as far as we know. And we're grateful for that. And I think we all felt your commitment. You had to be committed to come to New York this year and to study journalism. And I think you made a great choice and took care of each other. And you're going to be rewarded for it by coming out of school at a time when, for all of the disruptions and for all of the challenges in our profession, this is a fantastic time to be a young reporter. My goodness, how many stories are there for you to choose from? How many pathways to make a difference are there for you? And, you know, as happens also, you're coming out when the American economy is booming, which is not a bad thing, certainly, as they say, better than the alternative. So I think you're going to have an exciting couple of years. Lord knows we need you, given what's likely to unfold in this country between now and the end of 2024. So we're just wonderfully proud of what you've done while you've been here and excited for you as you go out. And again, today is about celebrating you. Not that we don't do that every day here at the Journalism School, but we're really going to pay attention to your achievements today. The way it's going to work is I'm going to introduce the first speaker, the Pringle Lecturer, in just a second. We have a couple of other professional awards that the faculty vote on every year and that we hand out at Journalism Day. And then we will hand out what will strike you as a pretty significantly large number of student awards, but fortunately you're a very large group, and I know the faculty spent a lot of time working on their decisions. And when those particular awards are given out and you've had a chance to applaud and celebrate your colleagues, we will announce the honors winners in the MS program. This is, of course, the system that MS students are familiar with, where 10% of the students in every class are awarded honors by their professors, and then those points accumulate over the year, and the honors group is announced. And after we read out those names, we will announce the 4 top winners in the MS class this year, including the class valedictorian. And if you go on DraftKings, the betting has just opened on your phone, but try not to be too distracted by your phone. So the odds may shift as the awards are announced over the next hour. To our MA colleagues, I apologize that you can't enjoy the same distinction. If you want an explanation, myself or other faculty would be happy to give it to you, but it's just impossible to keep score in the MA program in the way that we're able to do in the MS program. That's the only reason. But we'll have plenty of recognition of outstanding MA students today as well. So look forward to all of that. And now it's my honor to introduce this year's Pringle Lecturer. The award is named for Henry Pringle, who is a longtime faculty member of the school in days gone by. He was a Pulitzer Prize winner in biography and a reporter for the Washington Post. The Pringle Lecturer is selected by vote every year by our full-time faculty, and it's to identify a speaker who can come on Journalism Day to talk about politics and public issues related to Washington or to American politics. We're really fortunate this year to have with us Ari Berman. Ari is a senior reporter at Mother Jones, where he covers voting rights. His stories have, over the years, appeared in the New York Times, Rolling Stone, The Atlantic, Politico, The Guardian. He's on the air on MSNBC, NPR, PBS, and elsewhere. He's the author of Give Us the Ballot, The Modern Struggle for Voting Rights in America, which was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award for nonfiction. And he's also the author of Herding Donkeys, The Fight to Rebuild the Democratic Party and Reshape American Politics. You know, we talk a lot about public interest reporting at the school, and we've spent a lot of time helping you do that work this year. You've done some amazing work. But there's no field more important in the public interest arena in the United States these days than civil rights and voting rights and election integrity. And so I think we're all fortunate to hear from one of the country's leading reporters in this area, Ari Berman. So please welcome Ari.
Good morning, everyone. Congratulations to the graduates. Very exciting time, and I want to thank the faculty for voting for me. As someone who covers voting rights, I can assure all of you it was a free and fair election. I want to thank Steve and recognize him for all the great work he's done as dean. It's a real honor to give this lecture. When he told me that I was going to be giving the Pringle Lecture, I was a little bit surprised. First off, I thought he would choose someone who was more famous. And secondly, I was surprised he chose someone that had graduated from Northwestern. Although when we spoke, Steve said, "You graduated from the university, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So I appreciate you welcoming someone from Medill into enemy territory. And I got an undergrad, so you guys are already ahead of me there. And I want to, I don't know if Jelani is here, but I want to shout out Jelani Cobb, a friend and inspiration to me. As the next dean, so I'm sure I'll be back talking to him at some point soon. So I am actually turning 40 in 4 days. And the combination of my old age, my impending old age, and this lecture has made me reflect a little bit on my career in journalism and what might be relevant to you guys as you go out and enter the world right now in these perilous, but also in some ways as a journalist, exciting times. I got started in journalism when I was in high school. I realized that I was curious, I was a good writer, and I was a bit of a pain in the ass, which all were qualities, I think, for a successful journalist. And I actually realized pretty early on that you could pretty much write about whatever you wanted. And what I was interested in high school was hip hop and rap music. And so I started writing as a kid in Iowa for a website called Rebirth Magazine outside of Chicago that covered hip hop. And I realized that I could get free CDs back when people listened to CDs, which was very cool. I could get in to shows for free, which was awesome, as long as I drove 5 hours to the closest city towards me, and that eventually they would start paying me. And this was a lot more fun than bagging groceries or mowing the lawn. And so I started doing that. For a long time, the most famous people I'd ever interviewed were the rappers Method Man and Redman. And I interviewed them backstage in Milwaukee when I was 16 years old. And they were drinking something that I was clearly not old enough to drink and smoking something that was clearly not legal at the time. But that was my first foray in journalism. And then I went on to Northwestern, and a number of things happened that made me think more about politics and made me think more about the relationship between journalism and politics. I started my freshman year in the fall of 2000, during the 2000 election, and I was taking a class called Intro to American Government, a class that probably a lot of you guys take, a big lecture class where you learn the basics about American government. And I grew up in Iowa. I went to the caucuses. I thought, oh, I know a lot about how American politics works. And then we had a 36-day recount between George W. Bush and Al Gore, and I quickly realized that I knew almost nothing about American politics, and that I had spent not nearly enough attention understanding the dynamics of how elections work, and that elections sometimes are decided not by who shows up to vote, but which votes aren't counted. And so in a lot of ways, that first experience, my freshman year, set the seeds for the reporting that I would do decades later on voting rights. Then I went back to school for my sophomore year, right before my sophomore year, because we're on the quarter system. Right before I went back, I was asleep in Iowa. My mom woke me up, and she said, a plane has just flown into the Twin Towers. And this was a profoundly dislocating experience, I think for everybody, but particularly for someone my age, for someone your guys' age to have to experience. And I began asking really basic questions about the world. Why were we attacked? What role did American foreign policy play in this? How does the international system work? I began reading people like Steve to try to better understand what was going on. And eventually that led me to study abroad in Geneva, Switzerland at the UN. And most of my friends were studying in really cool places like Prague and Paris. I was stuck in the library of the UN studying the international system, but I really wanted to understand how the international system worked and America's role in it. And this was around the time that the US was ready to invade Iraq. And I was reading the German press and the French press and the British press, and I noticed that the European press was a lot more skeptical of the Bush administration's case for war than the American press was. That the American press seemed very sympathetic to the war and didn't seem to be asking the tough questions. And after I went to Geneva, I interned at a place called Editor and Publisher that covers the newspaper industry. And this was in January to March of 2003, so right as we were gearing up to go to war. And I remember there was the last press conference that George W. Bush gave before we went to war in Iraq. The last question at that press conference was, Mr. President, can you please explain the role that faith plays in your life? And I'm thinking, we're about to invade a country based on the flimsiest of evidence, and this is what they're asking him? Well, how about, where's the evidence of weapons of mass destruction? That seemed to me to be a pretty basic question that nobody had answered. And so I wrote a piece for Editor and Publisher with my editor at the time, Greg Mitchell, called 13 Questions We Wish They'd Asked about that last press conference. And it went viral in kind of the pre-viral era. I don't know, maybe people emailed it a lot. I'm not sure how things even went viral back then in the pre-Twitter days. But I got a call from the editor of The Nation magazine, which had been around for a long time, Katrina vanden Heuvel, and she said, do you want to write for The Nation? Because she had seen my column. And I said, well, I'm 20 years old. Can I intern for The Nation? I don't think I'm really ready to start writing yet. And so I got my internship. And I knew a lot about one very specific thing, which was media coverage of the war in Iraq. I didn't know a lot about most other things, but I knew a lot about that. And what I realized was, as a journalist, if you could become an expert in something that you were specific enough to know a lot about, but that was broad enough that people cared about, that could be a sweet spot to try to pursue a career. Because not a lot of people were focusing on media coverage of the war, but it intersected with the subject, the war, that a lot of people cared about. And so that's how I got my start in journalism. And I wanted to work for a place like The Nation that had opposed the war in Iraq, because I was concerned if I went to a place like The Times or The Post, which I had great respect for, but I worried that my work might be censored, or I might not be able to stand up to the political establishment, or if popular policies that I thought were wrong were in vogue at the time, that we wouldn't be able to critique them. So I wanted to find a role in what Steve called the social justice landscape, because that aligned most with my values at the time. I wanted to still be a reporter, but I wanted to be grounded at a place that I felt like was independent and that was willing to stand up to those people in power. Shortly after starting there, I went down to DC. I worked as a Washington correspondent. Our office was across the street from the Capitol, across the street from the Supreme Court, and across the street from the Senate. So you realized very quickly that power is concentrated in a very small area, and I wanted to understand those dynamics. And after dealing with the whole experience of the war in Iraq, I really wanted to be in DC or Washington because I felt like those were the places where you could have the most influence on people in power. I moved to DC. I didn't know it at the time because I was busy moving. I didn't have internet on my cell phone. I moved there thinking I was going to cover what Karl Rove had called the permanent Republican majority. This was 2004. Republicans had control of Congress. They had control of the White House. It looked like they were going to have control of the courts for a very long time. When I turned on my TV after I had finished moving, it was the first day of Hurricane Katrina. And I didn't know it at the time because I didn't have internet on my phone. I didn't have any kind of devices. So I turned it on, and here was Hurricane Katrina, and in some ways that was the beginning of the end of the Bush presidency. And instead of covering the permanent Republican majority, I really covered the unraveling of a very temporary Republican majority. And that led me to write my first book, Herding Donkeys, about the transformation of the Democratic Party from Howard Dean to Barack Obama. Then I was trying to think about what to do after the 2008 election, and I really kind of stumbled upon this beat of voting rights. My parents didn't meet marching in Selma. I wasn't born in the segregated South. I knew about the civil rights movement. I knew about the importance of voting rights, but it was a thing that, like a lot of people, I kind of took for granted. But for me, my come to Jesus moment, even though I'm Jewish, was after the 2010 election, when so many key states flipped from blue to red, or became a whole lot redder, places like Ohio and Pennsylvania and Florida and Wisconsin. And we began to see a wave of new laws to make it harder to vote. Things like the first voter ID laws, or cutbacks to early voting, or closing polling places, or purging the voting rolls. And this clearly seemed to me an attempt to try to nullify the election of the first black president, and to try to prevent the emergence of a majority-minority election, and to create, not by changing policies, but by changing voting laws, an electorate that would be older, whiter, and more conservative, as opposed to younger, more diverse, and more progressive. But it really wasn't getting any coverage. There were small stories in the Times, there were small stories in the Post, but no one had really put together that this was a national strategy undertaken by the Republican Party in response to the election of the first black president. So I did what I always tell young journalists not to do. I pitched a story about it without knowing that much about the subject. To my surprise, Rolling Stone said yes, and they said, get us 5,000 words in 3 months. And so the good thing about journalism is that even if you don't know a lot about something, you can start talking to experts. And I quickly did a crash course on voting rights, both past and present. And I published my first story about this topic called The GOP War on Voting in August of 2011 in Rolling Stone. And you can pretty much reprint it word for word today, or it would just be a whole lot worse than it was even back then. I thought I would write one story about this. I was a general politics reporter. I covered a lot of different things. But this topic really fascinated me, and it became a battle in the states. It became a battle in the courts. And I also realized that not a lot of people were covering it. So I also had something of a competitive advantage as well. So it was not unlike the media coverage of the war, something that was specific enough that I could be an expert in, but broad enough that I felt like really touched the very foundations of American democracy and of American politics. We saw 7-hour lines on Election Day 2012 in Florida because that state cut early voting from 14 days to 8 days and eliminated Sunday voting when black churches hold Souls to the Polls voter mobilization drives. President Obama said on election night, we have to fix this. Far from fixing the problem, though, it got worse. After the 2012 election, the Supreme Court heard a challenge to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and it challenged the part of the law that required those states with the longest histories of discrimination, places like Georgia and Texas, to have to approve their voting changes with the federal government. And even though I had covered voting rights for a while, I was still surprised by this challenge. And I began asking voting rights lawyers, experts, historians who I knew, very basic questions. Sometimes even if you think you know a lot about a subject, you have to drill down to the very basic questions. I said, why is the Voting Rights Act being challenged? What did it do? why 50 years later is it still so controversial? And I asked people what I should read to get up to speed on the Voting Rights Act, and I kept hearing, read this book of essays from Louisiana University Press from 1986. And I was thinking, no offense to LSU Press, but how come no one's written an accessible history of the Voting Rights Act that I could give to my mom or I could give to my friends that don't follow the ins and outs of politics every day? So I had my idea for my book, Give Us the Ballot. And my idea was I would start my story where all the other books about the civil rights movement ended. Because so many books about the civil rights era end in 1965 with the passage of the Voting Rights Act as this climactic moment in civil rights history. But I knew there was 50 years after that weren't that well told. What happened in 1975? What happened in 1985? What happened in 1995? What happened all the way up to the present day? And so that was my story. It took place from 1965 to 2015 on the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. And there was more coverage of this issue after the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, and there were new laws that were passed making it harder to vote. And you had to dig a little bit deeper to really understand the impact of these laws. When I first started covering this issue, I would hear all the time, what's the big deal about requiring an ID to vote? Or why can't people just vote on a Tuesday? Or what's so difficult about registering to vote? And some of these new laws that were passed were very, very instructive. There was a law that was passed out of North Carolina a month after the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. And they required ID to vote. They cut early voting. They eliminated same-day voter registration, all of these things. And it went before the courts. And the courts asked them some specific questions. They asked the state of North Carolina, the Republicans who are running the state, why did you eliminate Sunday voting? They chose one example. Why did you eliminate Sunday voting? And the state of North Carolina said, well, some people were using it more than others. And the court said, okay, well, who was using it more than others? And the state of North Carolina said, counties that were disproportionately African American and disproportionately Democratic. And the court kind of said, you just admitted to us in federal court that you meant to disenfranchise people based on their party, but more significantly based on their race. And it found that this law passed by North Carolina in 2013 targeted African Americans, in the court's words, with almost surgical precision. And it was amazing to read this opinion and realize that this wasn't written in 1866, wasn't written in 1966, it was written in 2016, describing a state trying to surgically target African Americans with almost surgical precision. But even in spite of this evidence, the media still remained very slow to cover this issue. During the 2016 election, there were 25 presidential debates, but not a single question about the gutting of the Voting Rights Act and the attack on voting rights. And so I think as a profession, we got so caught up by Donald Trump, we forgot to look at the foundations of American democracy and how the weakening of democracy led to a weakening of our politics. And I can't tell you how many people after Trump was elected told me, oh, now I understand what you're doing. This beat of voting rights is really, really important. But if you had paid attention to the radicalization of the Republican Party before Trump, Trump and Trumpism would not have come as nearly as much of a surprise. I don't need to catalog all of the ways that democracy was undermined in the Trump era. If you had told me when I first started covering this topic that a candidate would lose the popular vote by 7 million votes, would convince 2/3 of his supporters that election was stolen, they would ransack the Capitol, murder policemen, prevent Congress from certifying the electoral votes, and then convince 25 states to change their election laws afterwards, I would have asked what you were smoking. But that's where we are today. We are facing, the word unprecedented is often overused, but I think it's true. We are really facing unprecedented times where the very survival of American democracy is in question now. We are seeing voter suppression both on the front end and on the back end. The voter suppression on the front end, meaning all the new laws making it harder to vote, that's not new, although it's gotten worse. But on the back end, the idea that you're actually going to overturn an election if it doesn't go your way, that to me is new and truly shocking. And there have been some very dramatic moments, obviously the insurrection being one of them, But a lot of the action is taking place off center stage. It's taking place at state capitals in Georgia, or in Ohio, or in Florida, or in county election boards, or at local polling places. It's more like death by 1,000 cuts than one dramatic moment. You close some polling places in Texas. You remove some drop boxes in Georgia. You purge some voters in Ohio. And then elections start getting decided not by who shows up, but by who isn't able to vote. And if all that doesn't work, you then try to overturn the election altogether. And the end goal is to try to make democracy the exception rather than the rule. At the same time, we're seeing an erosion of rights that so many of us have cherished for so long and have taken for granted. And my challenge to you is to see how democracy, the weakening of democracy, affects whatever you're covering and whatever you care about, and to put democracy at the center of all of your work. Because I believe that if democracy is weakened, all other rights are in jeopardy as well. And that no matter what you care about, whether it's climate change or criminal justice reform or the immigration system, a broken democracy is going to lead to a broken politics, which is going to lead to all of these key rights being in jeopardy. And I'll just give you an example. The draft opinion of the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. You can't understand this decision without understanding that the same states that are attacking voting rights are the ones that are trying to restrict abortion rights. They are the same states that are trying to censor the teaching of history. They are the same states that are attacking the First Amendment. So we have to understand how all of these things are connected. You can't understand the coming decision on Roe without understanding that 5 of 6 conservative justices on the Supreme Court were appointed by Republican presidents who initially lost the popular vote and were confirmed by senators representing a minority of Americans, put there specifically in an undemocratic way so they would make undemocratic decisions, so they would overturn popular policies. So we have to constantly be questioning the systems we're reporting on. We can't just accept them as they are. We have to understand why are they that way. And if you see flaws in those systems, whether it's our systems of governance or our systems of criminal justice or our systems of immigration or our energy policy, ask why the systems exist that way. Who are they benefiting? I recently tried to explain the Electoral College to my 7-year-old daughter, and she nearly had a meltdown. Because to her, it didn't make any sense that someone who could get fewer votes could actually win the election. If it doesn't make sense to a 7-year-old, probably shouldn't really make sense anymore as a system of government. So constantly be questioning the systems that you're covering. The last thing I'll say, and I'm sure your professor stressed this with you, you can't do this job from behind a desk. You can't do it from your phone. You can't do it from tweeting. You can't do it by sitting in New York City. You have to go out in the field and understand the communities that you're covering. One of the coolest experiences I had as a journalist was I took 2 civil rights pilgrimages to Alabama with the late, great Congressman John Lewis. We went to Selma, Alabama, where he was brutally beaten on the Edmund Pettus Bridge by Alabama state troopers. We crossed that bridge with him, where he told the story of that day. We went to Birmingham and went to the 16th Street Baptist Church, where 4 little girls were murdered by bombs from the Ku Klux Klan ripping through the stained glass windows. We went to Montgomery, and one of the things we saw in Montgomery was really amazing. On May 20th, 1961, John Lewis was part of the Freedom Rides, which desegregated interstate bus travel through the South. Bus travel was segregated at the time. It was incredibly dangerous to try to desegregate these buses. They were going all the way from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans. And when the Freedom Riders, which was about 24 of them, white and black, stopped in Montgomery, the local police didn't escort them to the Greyhound bus station and tipped off the KKK that the Freedom Riders were coming. And they were attacked by the Ku Klux Klan. John Lewis was beaten over the head with a Coca-Cola crate and found lying in a pool of his own blood. He was taken eventually to a church that was run by Ralph Abernathy, the First Baptist Church, who was Martin Luther King's top lieutenant. And when the Freedom Riders went to this church, which was on May 21st, 1961, May 21st happens to be my birthday, so I always remember this day, even though I wasn't alive, obviously, in 1961. When they went to First Baptist Church, which is this beautiful church up on a hill overlooking a large cemetery with a lot of Confederate flags in it, when they went to this church, a white mob of 3,000 people surrounded the church, and they began throwing Molotov cocktails at the church. And you couldn't call the police because in those days, the police and the Klan were nearly indistinguishable. So John Lewis and the Freedom Riders were disguised as members of the choir. So if the mob attacked the church, they wouldn't be able to find the Freedom Riders. And Martin Luther King spent all night on the phone with Bobby Kennedy, the Attorney General at the time. And finally, Bobby Kennedy sent in federal marshals to protect the Freedom Riders. And John Lewis told this story at the church 52 years later. And the chief of police of Montgomery was there that day. And he was a white guy, Irish-looking guy by the name of Kevin Murphy. And on these civil rights pilgrimages, you heard a lot of speeches, particularly sometimes from these conservative white politicians. And they'd always talk about how much the South had changed and how terrible things were back then, but how much things had changed. And it was a lot of platitudes, and I was becoming kind of numb to some of these speeches, to be totally honest with you. My eyes would start sort of glazing over. But this sheriff from Montgomery got up, and he looked at John Lewis, and he said, "I'm sorry for what we did, Congressman. We enforced unjust laws." And he took off his badge, and he gave it to John Lewis. And it was this incredible experience. But as amazing as the experience itself, I later learned that it was the first time that a Southern law enforcement official had ever apologized to John Lewis for the violence that was inflicted on him during the Civil Rights era. And those are the kind of things that you learn when you go out in the field, that society's a lot more complicated than you think. It's a lot messier than you think. A lot of things that we think are settled are unsettled. But there's also these fascinating moments that you as a journalist are there to catalog. John Lewis often said that he felt during the Civil Rights Movement that he was walking with the spirit of history. And as journalists, we're lucky enough to cover that history. Sometimes we're even lucky enough to shape that history. And in July of 2020, John Lewis passed away. And it was a very dislocating time, I'm sure, for all of you guys. There was the pandemic, there was the presidential election, there was the murder of George Floyd, and all of the protests and marches, and really the fundamental questions about American society that for so long had been suppressed bubbling to the surface. And in his last op-ed for the New York Times in July of 2020, John Lewis wrote, "Democracy is not a state. Democracy is an act. It's something that we have to fight for every single day." So that's what inspires me as a journalist, and hopefully it inspires all of you. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Remarks are a thank you. So I mentioned that this day is often the kind of happiest one on the calendar for you all to celebrate your achievements. It's also a pretty good day for the faculty, and not only because summer beckons them. I know this was a big challenging year for you. It was also a heck of a year for them. And they're perhaps on average not as young and vigorous and immortal as many of you, and yet they will have my abiding respect for forever because of the integrity and commitment they showed by teaching in person in challenging and changing circumstances. And I know, talking to them, how much they enjoyed working with this group. But I thought maybe we could acknowledge them a little bit collectively. Yeah. And now I'm going to turn the podium over for the awards to come to faculty members, starting with the 2 professional awards that I mentioned. And I'd like to welcome Joanne Farrion, Professor Joanne Farrion, to the stage. And she will present this year's winner of the Mike Berger Award.
Hello, everyone. Congratulations. The Meyer Berger Award honors distinguished reporting in the tradition of the great New York Times reporter who set the standard for thought-provoking human interest journalism about everyday life and ordinary people. Since this award honors Berger, as well as the recipients, I want to take just a minute to tell you about him. He began his journalistic career at the age of 12 as an office boy on the New York World, Joseph Pulitzer's paper, and moved to the New York Times in 1928. He's still famous for his story about an unemployed World War II veteran who one day in 1949 stalked through his quiet neighborhood in Camden, New Jersey, firing his Luger pistol into shops and apartment windows, and a car stopped at a red light. 13 people died. Berger jumped aboard the first train to Camden, spent 6 hours there interviewing 50 witnesses, then went back to the office, and in 2.5 hours, he banged out a 4,000-word story, reconstructing this rampage with precision and vividness. Basically, in less than 9 hours, Mike Berger had written a master's project. But while he's celebrated for that feat, he was loved for his mastery of another genre, the human interest story, like the one about the blind man who miscounted his steps on the subway platform and fell in front of the train, or the woman who amassed a collection of 500,000 wishbones from various kinds of poultry, or the man who was haunted by a guinea pig. Stories that focus on the dramas and quirks and sorrows and struggles of everyday life and ordinary people. I'm pleased to award Evan Allen of the Boston Globe this year's Meyer Berger Award. Her story, Under the Wheel, documents the life of Anthony Pledger, who is from what Boston cops call a dynasty family. Pledger's father, mother, brothers, uncles, and great-uncles all had long and violent criminal records. These families, as Allen writes, pass violence like an heirloom from one generation to the next. After covering crime for years, Allen sought to understand this phenomenon, rooted in impoverished neighborhoods. She found Pledger, serving time in federal prison, and got to know him the only way possible, through letters they wrote each other over 3 years, 2,000 pages of correspondence. Allen also hit the streets, talking to people who knew Pledger and his family, and she dug into court and other records. Some of the judges have covered crime, and they've never seen a story like this before. Through deep reporting, Allen comes as close as possible to what all long-form narrative writers hope to accomplish, inhabiting the inner psyche of a character. With elegant prose, Allen dissects the why behind Pledger's actions. The story is chilling and dark, and yet at the same time reveals a man trying to reckon with his past. The 1959 New York Times obituary for Mike Berger stated, "In the field of human interest, he was supreme." Allen embodies this spirit in Under the Wheel. Allen, Evan.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. My whole career, I've covered people who the world forgets, people who are living on the streets or dealing with drug addiction or who've committed crimes, people who could disappear tomorrow and it really wouldn't matter to anybody that important. But Anthony was something different. The crimes he committed were not small. He was truly deeply violent, and he had lots of victims. It scared me to publish this story. I was actually afraid it was going to destroy my career. There's a lot of risk in writing 9,000 deeply sensitive words about a man in federal prison for sex trafficking teenagers. I didn't know if it was moral to look at Anthony. I was almost paralyzed by the fear that I was digging up a story that was small and sad and mean, something that should stay buried where it was, way out in the desert in California. There's a poem I thought about a lot while I was reporting and writing this story, and bear with me, I'm not going to read you the whole thing. But it's called Musée des Beaux-Arts by W.H. Auden. It's a poem about how we see each other and how we don't. The second stanza talks about a painting by Bruegel that shows the fall of Icarus. The painting treats Icarus's death as an afterthought. You look at it and you see a man on a hill with a plow, and you see a big, beautiful ship sailing across the water. The only sign of Icarus is his legs as he goes under the water. If you're not looking carefully, you're gonna miss him. Auden writes, in Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him, it was not an important failure. The sun shone as it had to on the white legs disappearing into the green water, and the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to go and sailed calmly on. I love this poem because it captures a terrible truth. Mostly, we're unseen. Mostly, we're not special. Mostly, when we suffer alone. So why would I love a truth like that? This is why. It reminds me that everywhere I look, when I'm walking down the street, when I'm standing in line at the pharmacy, when I'm pushing my daughter endlessly on the swings at the playground across the street from my house, I could look up, and if I'm really looking, and if I'm really curious, and if I'm really bold, I might catch a glimpse of Icarus. There are myths unfolding around us all the time, in the smallest and saddest and most surprising places. I kept writing to Anthony because I believed his story was a big story, disguised as a small and ugly and mean story. I believe we can learn more about our society and about ourselves by understanding the people who our society forgets, the people who we bury, the people who we can't bear to look at, than we can from understanding the people with power. It was painful to report and write this story, and it was painful to see and feel the humanity in a man who's done so much violence. But that humanity is there, and it matters. I believe Anthony's story is an American story. So to be honored with this award, named for a journalist who saw the big stories hidden in the small ones, means more to me than I can reasonably explain to you in the 4 minutes that I'm supposed to talk for. But as you go out into the world to find stories, but I'll leave you with this. As you go out into the world to find stories, look for the stories that terrify you, the stories that make you want to close your eyes. Those are the stories that you have to tell. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. We have one more professional award to hand out, to present, and I'd like to welcome Professor Ari Goldman to the microphone to do that.
The Paul Tabenkin Memorial Award was established here at the school in 1959 during the Civil Rights Movement, something we appropriately and significantly have heard quite a bit about today. The award was established to honor Paul Tabenkin, a reporter for the old New York Herald Tribune, who specialized in reporting that revealed the terrible effects of racial hatred and intolerance. The award honors the reporting of stories that ferret out instances of racial ethnic and religious discrimination. This year's Paul Tabankin Award goes to Ian Shapira of the Washington Post for a series of articles on the Virginia Military Institute, the nation's oldest state-supported military college. Here is what our judges wrote. Ian Shapira's investigation into the brutal legacy of racism and sexism at the Virginia Military Institute was courageous, rigorous, and movingly told. With his meticulous reporting and beautiful storytelling, Shapira gives us journalism that makes a difference by challenging Virginia Military Institute to confront its dark past. His reporting made a difference. It sparked a state investigation and led to changes at VMI, including the appointment of women and blacks to major leadership positions. I am honored to give this award to Ian Shapira.
Hello, hello, hello. Congratulations to you all. In the summer of 2020, after I wrote an article about a Confederate statue at Arlington National Cemetery, I received a ton of emails. The messages came from graduates at the Virginia Military Institute, a four-year college in Lexington, Virginia, about 3 hours south of Washington, D.C. The men were passing along a tip. The sculptor who designed the Arlington statue also made one of Confederate General Stonewall Jackson at VMI. They were lobbying the school to remove it. Would I write about their campaign? Sure, I said. This sounds intriguing. But what was VMI? I dug in. Founded in 1839, VMI is the nation's oldest state-supported military college. Its cadets fought and died for the South in the Civil War. Its most famous professor was Stonewall Jackson, who owned 6 enslaved black people and taught physics before fighting in the Civil War. In 1968, VMI was the last public college in Virginia to racially integrate, and it took a Supreme Court decision in the 1990s to force VMI to go co-ed. The Stonewall Jackson statue, I quickly learned, was treated like a religious icon by many students in the administration. Unveiled in 1912, it stood in the center of the college's campus right in front of the student barracks. Up until a few years ago, cadets had to salute it. But as students, especially black students, felt offended by the statue's presence outside where they slept, why wouldn't the school remove it? So in September 2020, I wrote about the Jackson statue controversy. But after I filed my story, my editor and I realized we needed to do a sequel, something more sweeping and penetrating. So the next month, I wrote about racism, relentless racism at VMI. Some of my findings. One black student had to endure a white professor's reminiscing in the middle of class of her father's membership in the KKK. One black and Hispanic freshman was threatened with a lynching by a white upperclassman during the college's Hell Week in 2018 for refusing to chant the names of VMI cadets killed fighting for the South in the Civil War. He was told, "Jenkins, if you don't sound off, I'm going to lynch you and use your dead corpse as a punching bag." In 2017, VMI's then commandant posed in a racist Halloween photo, and in 2020, another VMI staff member posted on Facebook, "I am seeing all these clowns taking a knee and bowing to protest. I'll take a knee, all right, to maximize my shooting platform." 2 days after my story published in the fall of 2020, Virginia's governor ordered a 6-month independent investigation into the college's culture. But my own run of coverage did not stop. I spent all of 2020-21 continuing to report news and enterprise stories. My first major piece chronicled the racism experienced by VMI's earliest black cadets. One former VMI staff member I tracked down gave me handwritten notes that he saved all these years that had been left for a black student accused of violating the honor code. Quote, "What's better than a black leaving VMI," read the note. "One that gets kicked out," with 3 exclamation points. My second piece of 2021 documented sexual assaults and misogyny at VMI, and my third major article showed how seniors hazed 2 freshmen by waterboarding them inside the barracks. All of the upperclassmen in the room who watched the waterboarding or who did the waterboarding were allowed to graduate or commission into the military as officers. How is this possible at a school that markets itself as an institute that produces, quote, citizen soldiers, and where students must adhere to a one-strike-and-you're-out honor code system? The state-ordered investigation led to a series of reforms, including the resignation of the college's longtime white superintendent, the hiring of its first black superintendent, and the school's highest-ranking black woman, who was VMI's chief diversity officer. That Stonewall Jackson statue, it got carted off campus too. My major piece of advice to you: one story always leads to another, if not a better story. If I hadn't done the Arlington Cemetery piece, I wouldn't have known about the Stonewall Jackson statue controversy. And if I hadn't done the statue story, I wouldn't have known to report out more ambitious pieces on race, misogyny, and waterboarding. I want to thank several people: Linda Robinson, the local enterprise editor of the Washington Post, a beloved figure in our newsroom, for her tenacity and a desire to tell the most ambitious story possible; Mike Semmel, the Metro editor of the Post; Marty Barron and Sally Busby, the former and current executive editors of the Post who supported this work; Abby Wright, executive director of Columbia's Professional Prizes Department; and the judges Daniel Alarcon, Dolores Barkley, and Ari Goldman. Let me also add that it's a privilege being here with Steve Call, my former boss, who I first met at the Washington Post summer intern pool party in the year 2000. And lastly, I want to also thank several former VMI and current students, many of whom cannot be named, actually, but some of those people can, and they will get a kick out of their names being uttered in this prestigious university. Caleb Tucker, Will Bunton, Kanaya Lee, Raphael Jenkins, Darren McDew, Frank Brown III, Michael Purdy, Shah Rahman, Donnie Hazeltine, Connor Powell, and Elizabeth Dobbins Moskowitz. The VMI story has been the biggest story of my career, and the Tobanken Prize has been the award of a lifetime and validation to the efforts of VMI students, alumni, staff, and faculty who came forward so their voices could be heard. Thank you all so much.
Summer intern pool party. What could go wrong? Actually, there's a lesson here. So the managing editor invites you to the pool party as a summer intern. The managing editor says, bring your bathing suit and a towel. Are you so mortified and shy that you refuse to go in the pool? This was the behavior of 95% of the summer interns. Nobody would go swimming. But the person who went in got a job. All right, now it's your turn. We're going to turn to the student awards and to present the first award, that amazing teacher and very intimidating softball captain, Professor Elisa Solomon.
Well, okay, congrats, everyone. I'm here to present the Nona Balakian Award. This is an award that was established in 1992 to honor the student who shows the most promise for achievement in writing about literature. Ms. Balakian is a 1943 graduate of the journalism school and was an editor at the New York Times Book Review and had much influence on American arts and letters for more than 4 decades. It gives me great personal pleasure to present this award for 2 pieces. One is an insightful and beautifully rendered review of a production of The Merchant of Venice, and the other, a gorgeously written essay that combines literary analysis of a Max Birnbaum novel with personal experience and wider cultural critique. The Nona Balakian Award for writing about literature goes to MA student Francesca Carrington. The next award will be presented by Aaron Teixeira.
Hi. So Richard Blood was a much-loved, no-nonsense, old-school newspaper man who turned professor, famous for his bushy white eyebrows and his brusque style. When he retired, a group of his former students, including me, established this award in his name to honor the best New York City-focused investigative hard news or news feature story. For an investigation into the decade-long failure by New York City to repair the crumbling public housing towers in Coney Island that were damaged after Hurricane Katrina, the Richard Blood Reporting Award goes to Eleanor Hoteling. And the next award will be presented by Professor Mark Hansen.
All right. Hello, everyone, and congratulations. I'm here to present the Brown Tao Award for Excellence in Computational Journalism. It's sponsored, not surprisingly, by the Brown Institute for Media Innovation and the Tao Center for Digital Journalism. It honors work that makes exceptional use of computation in the service of journalism or makes extraordinary contribution to our understanding of how data, code, and algorithms change the nature of reporting. For an in-depth, data-heavy exploration of financial gains to be had by passing through the White House's revolving door for appointees, this year's recipient of the Brown Tao Award studied financial records for appointees from the Obama administration that went on to rejoin the current White House and expose the often lucrative interim period between administrations. The award goes to Eric Fan. All right, the next award will be presented by Keith Goggin, class of 1991.
Good morning and congratulations to the class of 2022. I can't tell you how happy I am to be back in this room in front of all of you. I'm a member of the class of 1991, as Mark just mentioned, and I'm a former chair of the Columbia Alumni Association, as well as a current member of the university's Board of Trustees. I am privileged to stand before you this morning in my role as a member of the Columbia Alumni Association Board to honor one of Columbia's most impactful trustees and a true university treasurer, Bill Campbell, through the presentation of this year's Campbell Award. When we welcome you to our ranks tomorrow, Columbia's membership will swell to 380,000 living alumni. The CAA operates a worldwide network which maintains over 100 clubs and shared interest groups. And as you join this vibrant group as alumni, I encourage you to take advantage of all that the CAA has to offer. Without Bill Campbell, there might not be a Columbia Alumni Association. Bill was the trusted mentor and confidant of Steve Jobs, Tim Cook, Larry Page, Eric Schmidt, Mark Zuckerberg, and countless other tech titans. But Columbia held a special place in Bill's incredibly generous heart. He was a graduate of Columbia College and Teachers College, As a student, he was the co-captain of the football team, and he later became the head coach. From 2005 to 2014, he was the chair of Columbia's Board of Trustees, and during that time, he was the co-founder and champion of the Columbia Alumni Association. Perhaps the keystone of the CAA's accomplishments has been the development of a culture of what we call university citizenship. A university citizen thinks not just of their school or of themselves, but of the entire university and all of its stakeholders. A university citizen recognizes that we can all become better by working together. Bill Campbell embodied this concept better than anyone, and his example has inspired so many of us to do the same. First established in 2016 and presented each year at graduation, the Campbell Award recognizes one student from each of Columbia's schools who has exhibited Bill's generosity of spirit, his quality of leadership, and his devotion to university citizenship. This year's Campbell Award winner from the J School is a member of the MA program. She served as the elected president of the Society of Professional Journalists, carrying out chapter activities representing the student body and operating as the liaison to the school's deans. In nominating this student for the Campbell Award, SPJ advisor Rebecca Castillo noted that COVID resulted in many additional stressors on the J School's educational experience, and this student worked hard to have all of them addressed. She listened to the different voices and made sure everyone was heard on equal footing. She works with everyone with grace and calmness. I had the opportunity to meet her last night when the CAA recognized the Campbell Award winners from across the university at the Columbia Alumni Center on 113th Street. And I got the sense that no matter where her journalism career may lead, she will forever remain closely tied to 116th and Broadway, and she will work to tie all of you together and to this special place. It gives me great pleasure to present the Campbell Award to Tanika D'Souza. The next award will be presented by Lisa Cohen.
Good morning. So nice to be back together again. The DuPont Judy F. Crichton Award was established in honor of a pioneer in documentary filmmaking, Judy Crichton, who produced documentaries for CBS Reports and ABC News, and was the founding executive producer of the PBS series American Experience. Judy was a role model for many filmmakers, including Professor June Cross and me, at a time when the filmmaking profession was overwhelmingly dominated by men. This year, we have two winners. First, for a deeply reported, intricately woven narrative about the ghosts that can haunt first-generation African-American students, the award goes to MA student Kelly Brown for Survivor's Guilt. Kelly? The second winner for two compelling, character-driven stories about bureaucratic insensitivity and the resilience that can overcome the toughest odds. The award goes to Shakti Langlois Ortega. For her stories Is the Mayor's Plan Hurting the Homeless and Brooklyn Artist Reshaping Her Art. The next award will be presented by John Haskins, our Dean of Student Life.
I have a few awards at hand out tonight, some with multiple winners, so I'll ask you to hold your applause until you get the sign from me. The Philip Greer Scholarship Fund Award, presented for the first time in 1988, was established in honor of the late Philip Greer, a financial correspondent and columnist for the New York Herald Tribune and the Washington Post, to recognize outstanding financial writing in the Masters of Arts and Masters of Science program. The MS winner is Noor Diana Mohammed Mustaq. There we go. I trust you'll find me at some point. And the MA winner is Alice Clark Donaldson. And I did such a good job with that one, I'm going to just keep going. The Fred M. Hechinger Journalism Education Award was established by the Hechinger Institute on Media Education at Teachers College and is awarded for insight and excellence in reporting and writing on the subject of education. This year, the committee is awarding 2 prizes. The first for a penetrating look at the legacy of the South's so-called segregation academies, which continue to struggle with their racist heritage even after recent decades of integration, goes to MA student Alice Clark Donaldson. There we go. Thanks. I always like to have a fashion result. Thank you, Julie. The second award, Hechinger Award, is for a deeply reported account of how prison inmates in New York State, facing the ravages of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, created their own successful program for education and prevention, goes to 2 students, MS students Alyssa Tracy Daly and Chantal Lee. And next up will be Professor Michael Shapiro.
Good morning and congratulations. This was actually a really terrific field of entries for the editorial writing contest. And the winner for a powerful, passionately argued piece about the long and sordid history of lynchings in Pakistan and the government's inability and often lack of interest in bringing the guilty to justice The Journalism Editorial Award goes to Aga Raza. Do I get to keep the money? Or no? Well, if anybody's a friend, let her know, please. Sorry. I'll just leave this over here. But in the meantime, the next award will be presented by Dean Laura Muha.
The Peter Keller Prize honors excellent editing skills. It was created to honor Peter Keller, who spent 56 years at the Wall Street Journal, where he started in the composing room and rose to become national news editor. As night editor for more than 25 years, he created one of the highest editing standards in the nation, and he trained several generations of reporters and editors who call him the living legend of the Journal. The instructor who nominated this year's winner describes her as a really remarkable editor whose comments were insightful, often helping the entire class to see a draft differently, and always given with real empathy and sensitivity. Now I'm quoting the instructor. He said, "I found myself agreeing with her, nodding along, or she'd anticipate edits that I had in my notes and hadn't had a chance to articulate yet. She's thoughtful and generous and a deep thinker, and we've all benefited from her editorial vision all semester long." This year's Peter Keller Editing Award goes to Edith Hollinger Olmsted. The next award will be presented by Professor Du Lin Tu.
Congratulations, everyone. We haven't done this in a few years, though. This is really, really nice. So good work, everyone. So I'm here to present the Joan Connor Broadcast Journalism Award. It's presented each year to the MS student who has produced the most thought-provoking and original video or audio reporting. It was established by Dean Emerita Joan Connor, the class of 1961, who had a long and award-winning career as a producer for WNET Channel 13. The winner this year is Gabby Aoun. The next award will be presented by Professor Sam Friedman.
Good morning, everybody, and congratulations. And yes, it is so good to be here in physical space again after these last couple of years. The Linton Fellowship in Book Writing is funded by the Linton Foundation, who are also instrumental in the J. Anthony Lucas Book Prizes, and is intended to encourage excellence in nonfiction writing by the next generation of authors. There are 2 Linton Fellowships each year presented to students in the book writing seminar, and I'll do these in alphabetical order. The first one is for a book about the Holocaust that tells a story most of us never would have known. The story of 7 Polish Catholic priests who were seized by the Gestapo from their monastery because of the Polish Church's role in the resistance to the Nazi regime. They proceed to be imprisoned in Auschwitz and Dachau for 5 years. Their tasks include being made to build the crematoria of the Auschwitz death camp and being the subject of medical experiments at Dachau. Only 4 of them will survive. This book in progress has been written by the first of our winners, Rachel Marie Jones. Stay up here till we do the second, and I'll give them both. The second award is for a student who's working on a multi-generational, trans-Pacific narrative history of one Chinese family whose experiences tie together the Cultural Revolution in the People's Republic of China, the opening between the PRC and the United States in the more hopeful 1980s and 90s, and ultimately the crackdown in the Xi regime in China and the period of anti-Asian hatred drummed up by our former president in this country. This book in progress and this award winner is the handiwork of Megan Zhang. Yeah, you know they kill. The next award will be presented by Jane Eisner.
Oh, good morning, everyone. And it's so wonderful to be part of this celebration. The Arthur J. Harris Memorial Prize allows a leading Master of Arts student to complete an ambitious story. This year, we had an unusually large group of excellent applicants, but the judges decided that for his compelling and revealing proposal to explore how a network of politicians, landowners, and interest groups in Alabama maintain a property tax structure that favors wealthy outsiders and exploits rural, poor, Black communities, the Harris Prize goes to Jared Downing. It is also my distinct honor to present the MA Thesis Prizes, which recognize excellence reporting and storytelling. For standardizing death, a deep examination of the fraught deliberations over the legal and medical definition of death, taking the reader through complex scientific ideas with style and empathy, The second runner-up for the MA Thesis Award is Science Concentration student Adam Kovac. For Finding Endurance, a dramatic and beautifully written profile of Menson Bond, the navigator who finally located Ernest Shackleton's lost ship, the Endurance, in the icy waters of Antarctica. The first runner-up for the MA Thesis Award goes to Science Concentration student Adam Reeves Isco. I do want to ensure you that you do not have to be named Adam to win this prize. And finally, for Extreme Justice, a deeply reported, finely drawn story showing how the United States' approach to extremism creates two different classes of terrorists, sending a reformed Islamic radical back to prison while a domestic neo-Nazi walks free and fails to systemically rehabilitate either one. The Best MA Thesis Award goes to Politics Concentration student Ava Benny Morrison. And now to present the next award, Professor Ari Goldman.
When I was a student here many years ago, there was no MA program. All the awards went to the MS people. MS, your time has come. No, when I was a student here many years ago, my reporting professor, we then called it RW1, my reporting professor was the legendary Melvin Mencher, a very demanding and hard-driving professor whose students loved him and feared him in equal measure. When Mencher retired more than 30 years ago, his students and fans established an award in his name to recognize the kind of reporting and writing that Mencher championed. We got 25 entries this year for the Mencher Prize, and my fellow judge, Professor Marguerite Holloway, and I narrowed the field down to 3 top entries. I then, as is my tradition every year, I took those 3 entries, printed them out, walked over to Riverside Drive, to the apartment where Professor Mencher lives. He's now 95 years old. And I asked him to pick the winner. After all, we're giving an award in his name, he should decide. And he did. I will say first that he liked all 3. I'm happy to announce that the 2022 Mencher Award goes to a writer who put together a colorful news feature on a Bronx resident, once homeless himself, who founded an organization that helps others get out of homelessness. In the tradition of Professor Mencher, the story has many voices, no one source stories, he always told us. The story has many voices and vivid, finely observed scenes. The winner is Louise Valet. The next award will be presented by a new Pulitzer Prize winner, the wonderful, amazing Professor Azmat Khan.
The Henry N. Taylor Award was established in 1962 by friends of Henry Taylor, a journalist who was killed on assignment in the Congo at the age of 31. The award is given annually to a student in the International Division who has demonstrated the qualities of a superior journalist. The award includes a grant providing for travel in the United States before returning to her, his, or their homeland. This year, the award goes to Ngozi Monica Cole. The next award will be presented by Dean Winnie O'Kelly.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here, and I recovered from COVID just in time, so I'm particularly excited. The James Weschler Memorial Awards were established by the Pisces Foundation in memory of the former editor and columnist at the New York Post. The first Weschler Award goes to the student who submits the best story on a significant international issue. For his compelling piece about the racism and prejudice still present in Brazil, the International Weschler goes to Jesse Damba Diamba. The second Weschler Award is presented to the student who, in the opinion of the faculty, submits the best story on a significant national issue. For his sensitive and careful reporting on a difficult topic, mourners turning to Facebook to share their grief over losing lost loved ones to COVID, the James Weschler Memorial Award for National Reporting goes to Vincent Maximiliano Onofre. And finally, the third Weschler Award is presented to the student who, in the opinion of the faculty, submits the best story on a significant local issue. For a thoughtful and terrifying piece about the continued prevalence of assaults on subway workers, the local Weschler goes to Chloe Willow Shaken. And the next award will be presented by Professor Jonathan Weiner.
I'm very pleased to present the Lewis Winnick Prize. It is endowed by the Winnick family, and it's given for the best story about New York City. For a sympathetic study of a neighborhood in the midst of profound change, will Manhattan's Chinatown lose its barbershops? The 2022 Winnick Award goes to Shang Yang.
All right, we're getting there. Last up, it's my honor to recognize the MS honors list this year, as described before. These are the top 10% graduates of the class of 2022 based on honors awarded across classes throughout the year. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out the list in alphabetical order. You guys who are honored, please just stand and take applause. And then at the end, I'll welcome to the stage the top 4 points winners in the MS who will have won the Pulitzer Traveling Fellowship, which is a big chunk of change to go travel around the world now that we can do that again. And I'll also announce the valedictorian. And there's another Pulitzer Traveling Fellowship available to an MA student, and I'll award that at the end as well. So a lot of preview. Now to the main event. This year's MS honors list in alphabetical order. Brandon Alexander. Gabriela Aoun. Brett Aresco. Audrey Mayi Brown. Ngozi Monica Cole. Jaden Edison. Eric Fan. Naomi Feinstein. Annalise Gilbert. Jiawei Huang. Kasha O'Brien. Cameron Taylor Oakes. Isabel Ruel. Hisala Salim. Elizabeth Sander. Chloe Willow Shaken. Emily Shani. Maher Unissa Sher. Thomas Temesco. Alexandra Tremaine Pengelly. Louise Valet. C.J. Walker. And Haley Wooden. And now the awards to the highest achievers in the class. The 5 Pulitzer Traveling Fellowships are part of Joseph Pulitzer's founding legacy to the school. They're designed to enable travel and study abroad. 4 of them allow MS students to travel to observe people, politics, society, wherever they find a good story, and 1 is presented to a student who wishes to specialize in criticism of the arts, drama, music, literature, film. And for all of the winners, the award is truly a mark of achievement. So first, the Pulitzer Traveling Fellowship for a student with a special interest in the arts and art criticism goes to MA student Francesca Carrington. And now, from that aforementioned list of MS honor students, your 4 top graduates, starting first with Isabel Ruel. Congratulations. Next, unsurprisingly, given the number of times we've heard her name, Chloe Willow Shaken. Our next winner is Kasha O'Brien. She's already traveling, apparently. And now, finally, your valedictorian, don't hold it against her, Haley Wooden. All right. This concludes Journalism Day. Congratulations to all of you.